Isn't it scenic
Isn't it
and beautiful
weird?
out
It is
here?
Beautiful.
And this time of year, it hardly stinks at all.
That's right. To the dump, to the dump, to the dump,
dump,
dump, dump. Where
dump.
does that road go?
To the dump. Well, we're on our way still
Yes.
to the narrow gauge convention, and as you know, we've been there for a few weeks.
We have.
We just keep showing you guys more and more stuff.
Right.
What we want to show you this week, though, is something that I have been dying to see for years and years and years and years and years. Clear back in '91,
Wow.
the California State Railroad Museum announced that they were going to be building a new railroad museum.
Really?
The Museum of Railroad Technologies. And it's like, where's that going to be? How's that going to work? You know, and there was all these rumors, oh, it's going to be in the river, and then you take a riverboat. And anyway, what it is the old Southern Pacific shops and Central Pacific and Union Pacific shops are still there in Sacramento. The roundhouse, the shops, all that stuff still exists.
Wow.
And that's actually where the locomotive collection was stored for years and years before there ever was a California State Railroad Museum, because the Railway and Locomotive and Railway Historical Society, the same guys that brought us the Big Boy restoration, I mean the chapter that's in Pomona, they're the ones who saved the Big Boy. And but the original chapter is there in Sacramento, and clear back in like 1915, they thought they'd better start snapping up some of these transcontinental railroad engines that were all being scrapped out, and got railroads to donate. They started this group and started this collection clear back then.
Oh my word.
And they've been keeping this collection there in the old Central Pacific Roundhouse in Sacramento. And years later, 1981, California supplements that by turning it into the California State Railroad Museum to display the collection. Well, not the whole collection, because a lot of the collection's still in the old shops.
Yeah.
And then the shops are going to be in the new museum and stuff. And well, it's never open to the public. Or should we say, almost never. Because they're opening it for the narrow gauge.
That is great.
So we are going to that, and
Yes.
we are taking you to see it.
Yes.
So you get to see the collection that nobody gets to see, and you get to see what will now be the new museum, the addition to the California State Railroad Museum. So how cool is this going to be?
That's wonderful.
Check this out. So the California State Railroad Museum was open to the convention.
I couldn't wait to get in there.
Oh, it's our favorite, one of our favorite railroad museums. It's a great museum. This is one of their great pride and joy engines here. Central Pacific number 1, the Leland Stanford. Interestingly, they don't own it.
Oh.
It still belongs to the Stanford family, and it's on semi-permanent loan. But one of the very few surviving Central Pacific locomotives. Here's another one.
I like this one too.
Another one of the great engines here. This is Central Pacific number 4, which later on became Southern Pacific number 1. But one of the original Transcontinental Railroad engines from the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. And here we have another Central Pacific engine. It's an odd duck.
I guess so.
It's really weird. They build it here.
Oh.
It's their own homemade creation built right in the Central Pacific shops, right here where the museum currently stands.
It's a workhorse. I don't see any bells or whistles.
It's its own weird thing, but it is one of the few surviving Central Pacific engines. At some point in time, it got put on public display.
Oh.
And that saved it. And it's been sort of knocking about as one of, I think there's only like 4 surviving Central Pacific engines. I first ran into it at the Niles Canyon Railway. They acquired it. And technically, they're kind of part of the Transcontinental. They've taken over part of the old Western Pacific. It's a long and complicated story. But they wanted to restore this and operate it on their railroad. That never happened. And somehow it's ended up in the collection of the California State Railroad Museum. I don't know who, what, when, where, but at some point it got traded or sold or something. But it's over here now in the old back shops of the Southern Pacific Railroad.
What an interesting locomotive.
Now we kind of need to mention something here.
Yes.
They told us not to take any video inside the shops and not to share any of our stills on the internet.
Oh.
But we want to share, and we've been going back and forth, but they made us promise not to. So what we're doing is we're actually showing you pictures that other people took.
Oh. Well, there you go.
It's a cheap workaround, but that way we honor our commitment to not show you the pictures we took, and we can still show you the back shops here at the museum. They don't want people calling them on the phone requesting to get in here. It's just not open to the public. It's strictly off limits. Don't call them and say you want to see it. That's why they don't want it shared on the internet. So just take that under advisement, and we're going to show you pictures that other people took. The shops of the Southern Pacific at Sacramento were just gigantic.
Oh my goodness.
And the yards beyond, just a huge facility. And this is where they took care of the gigantic Southern Pacific steam engines. Notice the cab forward in the background. Isn't that neat?
That's really neat.
Now, some of this facility is really, really old because this was also the shops of the Central Pacific, clear back during the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. And a lot of the really, really old buildings have managed to survive to this very day. So the facility just sort of grew up around those old original shops and become a larger and larger and larger locomotive facility. And it's really fortunate that a lot of these buildings, most of these buildings, have survived to this very day.
They're sure beautiful.
Ah, I love it. So when the Railway and Locomotive Historical Society started collecting engines in the 1930s, this is where they kept them.
Oh, neat.
The railroad, they had some agreement with them, and they've always had their collection in these shops. Anyway, they had permission to be over here. Okay, let's check Professor Google here and see what the lay of the land is. Here is the California State Railroad Museum, this very small building right here. This is Old Sacramento, this area over here, which is where we're staying on our riverboat.
Yes.
But then just over here is the SP shops, this building at the end of the complex. And this is the building that they keep the collection in, that the museum is still using as storage for the undisplayed stuff, if you will. It's actually a huge building, and they've got a lot of neat stuff over here. For years, like I say, this is where the Locomotive and Railway Historical kept their collection. Here we have the C.P. Huntington from back then. It's really interesting when you think about it, because in the 1930s, nobody thought much of steam engines. They were just everywhere. But these really, really early transcontinental engines were already being seen as an artifact that should be preserved.
I love these old locomotives. They're my favorite.
And this is more like what people were seeing. This is a brand new engine arriving at the facility. How cool is that?
Wow.
Today, this is a museum piece, but back then, this was just transportation.
Brand new.
Brand new.
A lot of attention.
Now, as we say, they did open the shops here for the convention. Very, very, very rare event. Not something they do. Please don't call them and ask to get in, because the answer is going to be no. But for us, we were just very, very fortunate that they opened the facility up so we could come in and see where they've been collecting these engines for all of these years. Now, if you really want to see it, you can just wait a few years, because interestingly, they're about to open all of this to the public as a part of the museum.
Nice.
So that's going to be amazing. In the meantime, it's going to have to remain the double super secret back shops and undisplayed collection of the California State Railroad Museum. Most of what's back here is pretty much in the exact same condition it was in when it arrived. They haven't done restoration work on a lot of this stuff. They've just simply collected it and preserved it, but they haven't yet done any actual restoration work on most of this stuff. Some of the stuff they have gone through and completely restored. It just depends. And it's all kinds of different artifacts, not just locomotives and cars. There's all sorts of other things pertaining to railroad history back here.
What an absolutely large facility. Wow.
It just goes on and on and on. And this is just one of the buildings.
Oh.
Now, as I mentioned, some of the stuff back here has actually been restored, and at times it's displayed over in the museum. They're able to move things from this building over to the museum building and back and forth so that they can change out the displays over there. Moreover, they will take some of the engines that haven't been restored and put them on the display tracks over at the museum, which was the case while we were there. They had an unrestored engine on display over there. And sometimes this stuff will be displayed out in the open air on the pier, on the wharf. But inside the museum, they have, I think it's 5 display tracks.
Something like that.
It's like a little roundhouse off of a turntable over here. And on these tracks, they can move these displays around. They can pull these engines out and replace them with different engines and so on. Most of the displays at the museum are permanent, but the display tracks over here can be changed out whenever they get a notion to do that.
That's neat.
That's really neat. So I think every time we've come to the museum, the displays over in this area have been different.
They're
every
different.
single time. Yeah.
They are.
There's a couple of things like the passenger cars with the motion base and stuff. Those are sort of permanently displayed now. But everything else over here is changed out all the time. Here's Union Pacific 4466. And the first time I ran into this, they were running it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, out on the railroad up and down the river. And now it's in here. I don't know if it's still operational or if it's waiting for a rebuild or just what's going on. But first time I ever came to the museum, I got to ride behind this guy.
Well, fun.
But it's a beautiful little engine, and today it happens to be inside. I'm sure at some point they'll do a rebuild on this and get it running again, and it'll be back out on the railroad running and taking people for rides. Now, while we were there, they were running Granite Rock number 10, which apparently they had just recently rebuilt. It was a brand new rebuild on this engine, and they were running it on the railroad. So I'm not sure if they have the capability to completely rebuild an engine back there, or if they farm some of this work out, or just what. But they are able to restore engines like this one, the Bulker.
It really looks nice sitting there.
Isn't it beautiful? This has been on the waiting to be restored list for as long as I can remember. It's a Virginian Truckee engine, and it was sort of sad for years and years and years. It sat outside in a shed, and they kept saying, well, one of these days, we're going to cosmetically restore it. And, well, finally they've gotten round to it, because there it is. Isn't that so neat to see?
I love it.
Now, not everything in the collection is a steam engine.
No, it doesn't look like it.
Not at all. And fortunately, they're dedicated to the idea of preserving all things railroad. And most of what you'll see back here is more modern, something that just until recently was, in this case, pulling an Amtrak train. But it's railroad, and it's railroad history, and 50 years from now, people will be looking and saying, wow, I'm so glad somebody preserved that. Even just seeing some of these older paint jobs, at the time, you take them for granted. They're just everywhere, and see a Santa Fe engine driving along, and you go, well, that's very nice. But now you see it in the old colors and you go, wow, that's great.
If this were a car, they'd call it a frame-off restoration.
Yeah, no kidding. They're taking this guy down to the nuts, bolts, and gaskets. But how cool is it that they have the ability and the capability here in the shops to do that? I love these old covered wagons, the Fs and the E units. And right here you can see how the framework on that works. They've actually got quite a few of these so-called covered wagon locomotives here. And as I'm a big fan of those, it was really fun to see F units and E units being preserved.
And in the older paint jobs.
Yep, you just can't take for granted how cool these things look in their old original paint jobs. With all the mergers and everything, a lot of these railroads technically don't even exist anymore. They exist in some other guise, and to see Santa Fe or Union Pacific or whatever in their original paint jobs is, well, it's just a joy to see. And it's really neat too to see some of this old rusty unrestored stuff.
I think they should just leave it like that.
I think some of it should be just left alone. It's great to see it just like that. And as we mentioned earlier, pretty soon people will be able to see this. It's about to become the Museum of Railroad Technologies.
Nice.
Finally.
Finally.
After 30 years of talking about it and trying to raise money and so on, they're actually working on opening this facility as a public museum. How cool is that? And it's going to be more than just the museum. It's going to be a gigantic community of all kinds of different things going on over here.
I really love their concept here. It does give a clear picture of what it will look like.
Now there's more to it than the SP building. There are all these shop buildings over here, some of which are the old original Central Pacific shops dating clear back to the 1800s. And these, of course, are all going to be renovated and restored as well. And it's going to be shopping, hotels, restaurants, all kinds of different uses, not just the museum anymore. An entire urban center for the community. So we took some time to drive over just to see what in the world they're up to over here.
They're sure working hard and doing a lot of road construction.
Boy, they're going to it.
They are.
We spent some time just sort of watching them work on it. They're just, they're really going after it. I guess they finally have the funding, and it's a huge, huge project. It's just sort of overwhelming what they're doing here.
I didn't think they were able to use brick in California because of the earthquake standards.
It's it's against building code now, but these buildings have managed to ride out a whole bunch of significant earthquakes. So part of what they're doing here is retrofitting that so it won't fall down in an earthquake.
Ah, like they have here in Salt Lake.
Exactly. They've also sort of relocated the train station, if you will. They've created a transportation hub. Over here we can see the original train station, which is going to be integrated into the project.
Boy, it's a long way over to that original depot. The landmass this occupies is huge.
This development is covering a gigantic area, just hundreds, if not over 1,000 acres. The original rail yards have all been removed, and boy, it just leaves a huge landmass behind.
Looks like there's room to build an entire city right there.
Yeah, and that's sort of what they're thinking. This whole new area is going to be hotels, parks, restaurants. I mean, who knows exactly what all is going to be developed over here, but it's going to be gigantic. How about that?
That is wonderful.
Oh my God, I've been wanting for 28 years, since I first heard about this collection being hidden
Yes,
over there, and that they
right.
were going to turn it into this new museum.
Yeah.
And it's taken them 28 years, but now they're actually over there building it, and
they took us in there to see it.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is
just
beyond cool.
wonderful.
And finally, a chance to see the back spaces and secret parts and so on and so forth of the
Yes.
California State Railroad Museum.
That's so neat.
And I'm so looking forward to this new museum.
Yes.
It looks like it's just going to be amazing. And it's nice to see a railroad shop preserved,
It is.
because we saw at the Virginia and Truckee how they didn't save their
No.
roundhouse, and that was not that long ago.
Uh-uh.
In fact, when they announced that they were going to build this museum was the same year that Carson City tore theirs down, 1991.
Right.
And right now, as we speak, they're tearing down the shops in Salt Lake City.
I know. It's just, ugh.
If you're into building preservation and the preservation of these old shops and stuff, you have to win every day.
Yes.
You have to preserve this stuff every day. The people who want to tear it down, they just have to win once.
That's
and then
right.
That ends it.
It's
over.
gone forever.
It's gone forever. So how cool is it? And this looks like it's just going to be, it reminds me of Salt Lake's Trolley Square.
It does.
It really does.
It really does.
Only way bigger. And holy cow, this
Yes.
is just going to be so neat. I don't know when it's slated to open, but they're finally actually, honest to goodness, working on it.
Yes.
And that is so cool.
It is.
Anyway, next week we'll still be at the Narrow Gauge Convention. We're going to continue screwing around in
So much to
California. We
see.
have so much more to see. Trains to ride, places to visit, people to look up.
That's right.
Just stuff.
A lot of friends. Yeah.
A lot of friends. Anyway, if you haven't been over to the channel, pop over to the channel. And if you're not a subscriber, do subscribe. And the easy way to get over to the channel and subscribe is to click on the blue button.
Yes.
Are we ready for it? Gazoing! I've added a gazoing. Right there, blue button will make you a subscriber. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring, and we will see you here on Tuesday
Yes.
as we do some Tuesday